just a little bit more than midway through the Gita, Krishna shows Arjuna his Vishwarup. Vishwa means universe. It's actually an old Sanskrit word. Nowadays, in more classical Sanskrit over the last couple thousand years, the word that's used is sarva. Sarva means all or everything. And the word Vishwa, which has the same meaning, it was from an older, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, like thou in English. How art thou is an old way of saying how are you. And so art thou is an older form of English. So if somebody walks up to you and says, how art thou? I mean, that would be bewildering if they did that. Let's get that door closed, Pavan. Along with a recommendation, they stay a little quiet. Thanks. If someone was to say to you, how art thou? It would be extremely bizarre because no one speaks in that antiquated English anymore. But if you're reading in a book, and you read, where art thou, or how art thou, or stuff like that, you'll understand that the book was written some centuries ago when that was commonplace, and that was contemporary language. So sometimes even within a given language, English in this case, a language that all of you are familiar with because I'm talking to you in English and you appear to be following what I'm saying, so I'm just making that assumption that you guys speak English. Even within a language like English, that we're all fluent in, there's different stages of the evolution of the English language. And if you're reading stuff, like the King James Bible is kind of dated at this point, and a lot of the idiomatic phraseology of that book needs to be redone. And so every, 50 years or 100 years, they do a new version of the Bible. They have a new King James Version. The King James Version, the original one, was done in 1611. And they actually have a new King James Version where they updated the language and made it more easily accessible for the modern reader. Anyway, Vishwa is an old, it's very, very old Sanskrit. It's Vedic Sanskrit. And it means all, universe. Vishwarup. Rup means form. That's where I actually get the word rupee from. Rupee comes from rup in Sanskrit. Rupee. It's a name for Lakshmi Devi. Lakshmi, one of her names is Rupee, one who has a beautiful form. And that's the name chosen for the Indian unit of money. Did you ever think of that? You ever think of that, Kalpesh? No. Pretty cool, right? A lot of times if you speak the language naturally, by birth, you don't ask these type of questions. And so when you learn a language, a lot of times you'll ask these kind of questions and there's all sorts of interesting little factoids that you might get if the language is not natural for you, if it's not native, if you didn't grow up speaking it. You never knew that, right? About rupee. Fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. Vishwarup, the universal form. This is it's both a universal idea and something which also was explored in a particular way in the Vedic literatures that wasn't done in other traditions. There's, of course, the tree of life idea and the idea of Pangea or Mother Earth, and you personify something. So you view the earth as a mother, Mother Nature. or you view the universe as a living organism. You view the earth as a single living organism. You speak about the tree of life, that's kind of an old, and then you put all the different species in that tree of life. So these attempts have been made. I mean, even there's Ymir, the frost giant, that was killed by the Norse gods, and the universe was created from his body. So when you look at mythologies and when you look at old ideas, you find this attempt to explain all life as having a common thread. There's orthogenics. There was this old idea that when you had an egg and the animal was gestating in the egg and forming, that then on a macroevolutionary scale, that animal would also evolve along similar lines that it evolved from the egg, and what was reflected in the small is reflected in the great. You find this in alchemy, yata lohe tata dehe, as it is in metal, so also in the body, as above, so below. You get these ideas where people are looking for some kind of Fibonacci sequence or something where you can find some perfect geometric, actually that's why the ancient Greeks were so fascinated with geometry. They were looking for some perfect ideas about the nature of the world and how to organize things. So anyway, there was this idea, it's no longer extant. It gave way to Darwinian evolutionary theory and random genetic mutation. But there was this idea that animals will tend to evolve along certain predestined channels. The nature of life is that it evolves in certain directions automatically. Anyway, that's a kind of a tangent. So we have these ideas, and if you look at the history, I mean, you have, of course, the great chain of being, Scala Naturae, the natural order of things, that, was Dionysus, the Areopagites, and Aristotle before him came up with, that everything that exists in the world is in a great chain, and there's God and then 9 levels of angels, and then below that there's all within human society there's the king, and then all the serfs and the peasants are below him, and then you have the animals, and then plants, and then finally minerals. So if you look at the history of the world, you'll find attempts to taxonomize and understand the world and see everything united together in various ways, either in a hierarchy, in a sacred order, or a scala naturae, a natural order of things, or a tree of life. Did you guys follow this? I mean, even within alchemy, the idea was that you could make lead into gold because they were connected in a chain. And so if you found a catalyst, the philosopher's stone, you could then turn metal into gold. They did this in India too. They would... Aurangzeb, you guys know who Aurangzeb is? He's a Mughal ruler. Big guy. There's a letter from him in the 1500s, 1600s, to a Hindu monk, and he writes him a letter saying, I need X amount of treated gold, and then I'll protect your monastery. And what what they're called Rasa Siddhas, the alchemists of ancient India, they would take mercury and they would treat it with sulfur or mica, which would have a chemical reaction with the mercury and activate it. And then if you took gold and you touched the gold to the mercury, the gold would disappear into the mercury through a chemical reaction, and it wouldn't increase the volume of the mercury at all. So you put large amounts of gold into a small bit of mercury, and through chemical reaction, the mercury would almost not get any bigger, but it would swallow all this gold. And then you would eat that mercury. And then it was like ingesting so much gold, and eating precious metals has had a long history of giving you vitality and supposed to be good for you. And so And Aurangzeb, the ruler of all of northern India, was doing this. He was working with the Hindu monks and their monasteries and getting himself treated mercury with so much gold to try to increase his strength. They also did it with meat. They would feed one chicken to another chicken, and then that chicken to another chicken, and then they would eventually eat like 5 or 10 chickens down, and they think they got the vitality, the strength of. Yeah, it's just weird meat-eating culture. They do stuff like this. Anyway, Krishna shows Arjuna his Vishwarup, which was his universal form. Now, I said it's kind of commonplace, and it was part of the old world view, but it got expressed in a very particular way in the Vedic tradition. And that was that the universe was seen as the body of Krishna. And everything which existed, and this goes all the way back to the Rig Veda. There's a Purusha Sukta in the Rig Veda. Om Sahasra Sisha Purushaha Saha Saksha Sahasrapat. You know how to chant it? It goes all the way back to the Rig Veda, the oldest Sanskrit literature in the world, the Rig Veda. And there's this Purusha Sukta, the prayer to the Purusha. And it was understood that the creator, the Purusha, the word Purush in Hindi means what, Kalpesh? It means man. If you go to a bathroom in India, and one bathroom is for ladies and one bathroom is for gents, what will be the word on the men's bathroom? Purush. Purush means men. It also means person. Like we say mankind sometimes to mean men and women and children. And it also means God. It's a multivalent word in Sanskrit which is used in a variety of ways. The Purusha Sukta, the prayer to the original being. Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam. That the one eternal gave rise to many eternals. Krishna gave rise to so many souls. The one conscious being gave rise to so many conscious beings. And so this is an old Vedic mantra as well, from the Upanishads. So in the Rig Veda there's a Purusha Sukta, and it's a prayer to the Purusha, to the giant, to the original person, to the original being. And it's a vision of the universe and everything which exists in the universe as all being contained within the body of the Absolute. So Krishna showed that to Arjuna in the 11th chapter. And it was stunning and wonder-striking. And eventually Arjuna became disturbed. It was too awesome of a vision. It was too astounding of a vision. It was too powerful and opulent. It broke his mind. And he said, "Who are you? I don't understand. I'm scared. Who are you?" And then Krishna spoke these 2 verses in response. So he showed Arjuna his form as the universe. Arjuna had a beatific moment where he became enthralled and he was ecstatic. But then that shifted as he saw the destruction of the universe also happening within the body of Krishna. And that disturbed him. And he said, "Who are you? I'm confused." And Krishna spoke these 2 verses. Kalo asmi lokakshayakrit pravridham samahartum lokan samahartum iha pravritaha rite pitvam na bhavishyanti sarve ye vastita pratyanikeshu yodaha. Krishna said, "Time I am. And I have appeared to destroy the worlds. Except for you, no one on either side of the battlefield will continue to exist." This verse was quoted by Oppenheimer, the German physicist who invented the hydrogen bomb in the Manhattan Project, which was exploded with the Trinity Project. when the bomb exploded and there was a mushroom cloud in the air that he was watching live from a safe distance, he quoted this verse in Sanskrit. Kalo asmi lokakshayakrit pravridham loka samahartum iha pravrittaha. He quoted that piece of the verse. We know this because in 1965 he gave a television interview and he told people, I quoted this verse when the bomb exploded.
Yeah, I saw that.
I saw it too. Not in 1965. But I saw it too on YouTube.
He said, I couldn't help but think.
I couldn't help but think. Yeah.
And he quoted the verse.
Yeah. He was a Sanskritist. He did a translation into German of the Gita along with a commentary. Oppenheimer was a fan of India. The Germans were fans of India. Hitler with a swastika. I mean, it was just, but before Hitler, Max Mueller and the early Indologists, going back over a century, the Germans had a fascination and appreciation for Indian culture that went back into the 1700s. And so Hitler's fascination with power symbols and the Aryans and stuff, it was from a long tradition. He took it in a particularly morbid direction, but it was a long-standing appreciation. And so Oppenheimer, was raised. He learned Sanskrit as a boy and continued into his adulthood, enough so that he actually knew the verse in Sanskrit. Usually when you think of everything being created by God, you think of rainbows and unicorns and pots of gold at the end of the rainbow and roses and beautiful flowers and spring days and cherry blossoms and the warmth of the sun and the beauty of the moon and the soft rains falling gently on your field and the road rising up to meet you and the wind being always at your back, etc., etc. But if everything comes from Krishna, then so does entropy and death and destruction and disintegration and time. Time is really entropy. Time destroys things. It disintegrates things. When we talk about disintegration, I think of a ray gun from Star Trek or Star Wars, and you shoot somebody and they turn into dust. They're disintegrated, because that's how the term was used in my childhood. But Srila Prabhupada used to speak about time as disintegrating, because things are integrated, and with entropy over time, they are disintegrated. Again, it's an example of somebody who learns a language as a second language and them having a particular insight into the etymology of words and the meaning of words that might escape even a native speaker. Did you guys see that? That was pretty cool. I did that at the beginning and I did it again now. Okay. So, just in case you missed it, this is my little humble brag for the day. Time is disintegrating. Time is entropy. Time takes things that are organized and makes them chaotic. That's an indefatigable force of reality. It's there as the fourth dimension. It's there as a second law of thermodynamics. Any version of reality must contend with and define and incorporate time into its explanation. Otherwise, it's missing something. So Krishna's incorporating time into his discussion. And he's saying, I am time. I've appeared to destroy the world. That's why Arjuna was so spun out by what he saw, because he saw the destruction. And except for you, all these kings, na bhavishanti, they will not exist. It's interesting because Krishna says, na bhavishyamaha, never will any of us not exist. But here he says they will not exist. He means they will not exist in this present form, not that their soul will be destroyed, but just their body will be destroyed. But he uses very emphatic language. Na bhavishanti sarve, all of these beings will not exist. And so to show a Vishwarup, to show a tree of life, you also have to show a tree of death. To show a tree of the origin of the universe, you also have to show a tree of the destruction of the universe. And Krishna, being a good deity, a complete deity, is also incorporating the annihilation into the depiction. This also is why you have the apocalypse in the Christian Bible. I don't want to get into that too much, but you have to have an end of times also, and a winding up also. It's part of completing the cycle of life. Most of us don't think like this. It's actually disturbing to think like this. Most of us just want to live forever. We know we're going to die. We're aware of that, but we don't spend a whole heck of a lot of time thinking about it. I mean, imagine if somebody gave you a really, like an amazing house to live in for 10 years. An amazing house, like a really nice house. 10-story, maybe that wouldn't be so nice. A 1-story, mid-century modern, over many acres. And but then after 10 years, you had to move out. You would be thinking about where you're going to move to. You wouldn't just wait for the sheriffs to come and evict you. You would think it through. And as the years are going on, you'd be thinking, okay, at some point we're going to have to move to another place. I got to save money for that. We got to plan what we're going to be doing. But I don't think most people, present company included, spend a whole lot of time thinking about how they're going to wind things up, how they're going to leave this world, how they're going to die, how they're going to let go. We're gathering stuff for most of our lives, but we're not practicing the art of letting go. We don't like to let go. It's not even our nature to let go. It's because the soul and the body are strange bedfellows. The soul is eternal, but the body is temporary. The soul can love without limit, but the body places limitations on you. That's why spiritual life consists to some extent of transcending your body and experiencing another dimension of reality. So, Krishna says this, and then he tells Arjuna, Tasmat tvam utishta yasho labasva bunksha rajam samridham maivate niyatam sapurvam eva nimitta matram bhava savya sachim. Krishna then says, the next verse Krishna says, he says, Tasmat tvam utishta, therefore get up. This is imperative language. He orders him, get up. Utishta, utishta, get up, rise up. Tasmat, therefore, tvam, you, tvam is also older Sanskrit. Utishta, therefore you get up. Jitva shatrun, having conquered your enemies. Bhungshva rajam samridham, enjoy a flourishing kingdom. Mayaiva ete niyatan sapurvam eva. They have already been killed by me. Nimitta matram, only an instrument. Bhava savya sachin, be, O archer. Get up, prepare to fight, win glory, conquer your enemies, enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They're already put to death by my arrangement, and you can be but an instrument in the fight. These two verses are Krishna's answer to Arjuna's bewilderment, seeing the destruction and the carnage of the world. Witnessing death and why people grow old and die and why people suffer and why reversals happen and people get sick and have cancer and get in car accidents and suffer all sorts of things, congenital and also caused, within somebody's lifetime and natural disasters and everything else. Seeing that destruction, seeing that carnage, seeing that suffering, seeing that quote-unquote evil visited upon one person by another, Arjuna became bewildered. He had an existential crisis, and he asked Krishna, what is this? Who are you? What are you doing? And Krishna's answer was, I'm time, and I've come here to destroy the world. And except for you, everyone on this battlefield is going to die. Therefore, get up, fight, conquer your enemies, enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They're already put to death by my arrangement, and you can be but an instrument in the fight. Do you guys follow that? I think this is edgy. I think what Krishna's saying here is provocative. On any number of levels. Number one, it seems to smack of predestination. Just on the surface, prima facie, just at a glance. They're already put to death by my arrangement. That would smack of a full predestination where everything is already ordained. Of course, if everything's already ordained, then every bad thing everybody ever does to anybody else is already ordained by God. And now God is the genesis of all evil and suffering in the world. And why wouldn't all good, all powerful God create so much suffering? So a key ingredient to solving the problem of evil is you have to not blame God for the bad stuff that happens, which means we have to blame ourselves, but then you can't have predestination. And so if Krishna goes too big on the predestination thing, it leads you down that rocky road. How do you escape the predestination? But there's nothing remotely resembling free will in these verses. Certainly, who said that, you or you? Yeah, Scott, right? Certainly, free will does escape the predestination conundrum. The problem is the verse doesn't have any free will in it.
If you have time, there's arrangement is time. Time. That's the arrangement. The born is subjected to time. Beyond your control, but it's not. Man, I'm not going to go there.
I like where you're headed. I'm gonna add to what you said. I like where you're headed, sir. Does Krishna tell Arjuna you should be an instrument? If Krishna tells Arjuna you should be an instrument, what is that? By Krishna telling Arjuna you should be an instrument, what does that mean Arjuna can also do? He can choose not to be an instrument. If Arjuna can choose to be an instrument or not be an instrument, does Arjuna have free will? Therefore, there's free will within the verse. Do you guys follow that? If time existed and simply moved you from point A to point B and you had no free will, it would still be consistent with predestination. But within that time, we have free will. And even within this verse, with its incredibly predestination-esque language, there's still a massive acknowledgement of Arjuna's free will because Krishna's telling Arjuna, you should do this. And if there was no free will, then Krishna would just want Arjuna to do it and it would happen automatically. Did you guys follow that? Because there was no concept like evil. It's interesting, again, when you look at the language or culture, what they have in language, what they don't have in language is very telling. In Spanish, you can be respectful to somebody. You could say, ¿Cómo estás? To your buddy. How are you, my friend? How are you, pal? How are you, buddy? It doesn't even translate right into English. It's more like, what's up? ¿Cómo estás? What's up? But ¿Qué tal? Is actually what's up. So ¿Cómo estás? Is how are you? But you conjugate the verb estar in a familiar way as estás, and it becomes how are you, friend. Or you can say ¿Cómo está usted? And that's a very respectful way of saying to somebody that's elder to you. So by looking at how Spanish has verbs which are conjugated, and they have a respectful way of addressing people, a formal way of addressing people, you understand that that's a language where respect was very important. We don't have that exact thing in English. Sanskrit has no concept of evil.
It's just a choice.
Not exactly. Evil in English philosophy, evil refers to a fundamental, basic badness, sadisticness, malice, on a core level as a fundamental quality. In a dualistic world, there's good and there's evil. Good is an innate quality, evil is an innate quality. That's why there's a Satan and there's an eternal hell where all the evil people go forever. 5 billion people in the world believe in this. It's the prevailing view of the human society, is that real evil exists as a basic, fundamental, like core identity of so many people. There's nothing like that in Sanskrit because they have a pure soul theology that everybody is ultimately pure. And although you may be covered by illusion and you may make mistakes, you're never on a core level ever fundamentally compromised. Your integrity is never compromised. Just like water. You can have water in a toilet, it mixes with stool and what have you, and it becomes undrinkable. But you can distill that water, and you can heat it and steam it and distill it, and then it's retained. On a molecular level, the water never becomes contaminated by the fecal matter or dirt or whatever it might be mixed with. And it can be clarified, and it can be purified, and it can be distilled, and it becomes drinkable again. It becomes totally indistinguishable from, natural spring water that was distilled. It's a totally different way of viewing the world. If you view the world in that way, there's no fundamental evil. Therefore, there's no word for evil. Therefore, there's no problem of evil. And therefore, Krishna can make big statements like, everything is under my control, while at the same time acknowledging your basic free will, and he's not worried about running afoul of people who want to create the problem of evil and use it to attack the idea of an all-good, all-powerful deity. Do you guys follow this? That's why the problem of evil doesn't show up. It's why sometimes Krishna gets a little edgy and says stuff which, you'd have to clean up if you were going to do a Western philosophy class, because it leads down some pretty dark roads pretty quickly. When you understand the culture it came from and their conception of self, it's not so disturbing. But if you were disturbed by it, again, Arjuna his free will is acknowledged in the very verses we're quoting. Not even in other places of the Gita where it also is acknowledged. But in these very troubling verses, free will is articulated. It's just a little bit hidden, such that you might not have noticed it unless somebody pointed it out to you. So, the verses are also edgy because they speak about Arjuna killing people, and it's a holy war, and he gets to enjoy a flourishing kingdom. And it starts to sound a whole heck of a lot like a jihad, which is super problematic. Not really. I mean, let's think about it for a second. Let's imagine that a gunman broke into this building and began firing. Somebody came to our temple yesterday and said, hey, we've heard word on the street that there's going to be some hate crimes against Hindus, so we're just warning you. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm in Laguna Beach, man. We're Hare Krishnas. We're not high on the hate crime list. It's not. This part of town isn't high on the hate crime list, and our tradition isn't either. But let's say some gunman broke in here and started mowing people down, and a police officer came and shot them dead. That wouldn't be a crime. There was an imminent threat. Is that Howard? Hey, good to see you. There was an imminent threat. Howard's a police officer. Just how funny is that? I just said a police officer came in and saved the day, and you walked in. It's ridiculous. You want to sit here? You got long legs. You want to sit here? You good? All right. So, and Howard ran in with a carry concealed weapons permit, and he shot the criminal dead. We would all be grateful to Howard. He wouldn't go to jail. It was justifiable. It was self-defense. All of us believe in violence in certain contexts. To protect a child, to protect 1 million children, to protect 1 billion children. The question is where you draw the line that violence is acceptable. Even Gandhi wrote to Mountbatten in 1947 that if India wasn't freed from British rule, that they were going to rise up. It might have been 1946. India won its independence in 47. All of us believe in violence on some level, in certain contexts. That's why amidst all the murder laws, there's always self-defense caveats and exemptions. So if a war is justified to stop genocide or some other horrible atrocity, whatever that means for you, whatever justifies it for you, then that killing would be sanctioned. And it's no longer killing, and it's for killing's sake, and it's no longer karmic, and it's no longer a crime. In fact, you might get a medal for it. Howard would get a medal. You get a book deal. Right? You get his 15 minutes of fame. A nun and he's pregnant. If she got saved, she might name her firstborn child after him. He'd be a hero. It's always the context of the violence that determines whether or not it's acceptable, whether or not it's wanton, whether or not it's justified. So after we troubleshoot these verses, so on one hand, this idea that I see all the suffering in the world and I'm wondering what it's all about. If you haven't asked yourself that question, then you are philosophically a child. You're philosophically a child. This asking these questions, thinking about such things, is part of the pubescence of the philosophical mind. Everyone has to have these existential moments and feel this existential angst. Arjuna had that on the pages of the Gita. And Krishna's answer was just brutal, savage. Time I am, destroy the world. I've killed everybody. Rise up, get up, fight. Just be my instrument. It's totally unapologetic. It's totally unapologetic. Give me a second. I'll get you at the end, Scott. It's totally unapologetic. And Scott's right there, under the Garuda Stamba. Not my brother Scott, my friend Scott. You're looking for my brother Scott, right? Yeah. My brother's name is Scott too. You're also my brother from another mother, but he's my brother from my actual mother. My older brother's name is Scott. And Shudi heard me say Scott. He started looking around for Scott. And I want to hear what you have to say, but I'm just trying to wrap it all up with a bow tie now. So, Arjuna had that existential moment, which we should all have at some point. And he cried out, "What's this all about?" And Krishna responded back, really heavy. Really heavy. But I think there's something quite beautiful in this as well. Number one is it forces us to start to look at time and entropy as being a good thing. So let's tackle that one first. Is time and death and karma and destruction a good thing? Yes. Why is it a good thing? Renewal. I mean, maybe it's renewal. If you just die, maybe, how do you might not get renewed. Maybe you become like plant food or something like that. I mean, it sounds sexy to say renewal, but I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot behind it. And you're answering every question, man. Let some other people speak. Yeah.
It forces you to learn and grow and think about Krishna.
It forces you to learn and grow. You don't have free will, Jack.
It doesn't force you to.
You just said it forced you to.
Should cause you to.
Karma. What comes around goes around. Nudges you in the direction of learning without forcing you to learn. It preserves free will, but it gives you the opportunity to learn from your mistakes. And all good, all-powerful God, and all good God would want to help us as much as he could without compromising our free will, and all-powerful God would. Karma does that. It nudges you by there being consequences to your actions. Now, you might not remember everything you did, but that's not necessarily bad. If you remembered everything you ever did, what wouldn't you have? You wouldn't have free will. Because the totality of your ownership of everything you've ever done would be such that it would overwhelm any sense of freedom towards illusion that you could engage with, engage in. We have to forget. And just because you forgot, like you smoked for 20 years and you quit for 30 years and you get senile and then you get cancer, I can't remember smoking. So what? Stuff happens all the time. You don't remember, but you get your consequences. Chickens come home to roost, as Malcolm X used to like to say. When JFK got assassinated, Malcolm X said, when chickens come home to roost, the farmer's never happy. The farmer's never sad. He goes, I don't care. He got in big trouble with the Nation of Islam for that. With Elijah Muhammad got him in big trouble. It was the beginning and the end of his relationship with the Nation of Islam because they told him not to speak negatively, but Malcolm X wouldn't be silenced. He spoke really powerfully about they got their karma. Chickens came home to roost. Why is that? Why should that be a cause of sadness for me? These people subjugated and destroyed and disturbed my people for centuries, and now it's coming back to them. Karma, even if you don't understand all the details of your karma, you can at least understand the principle of it. And that's enough. You can see other people suffering the results of it. And that's enough. You can see yourself suffering and then extrapolate from that to a larger scale. And that's enough. And it nudges you towards learning without forcing you to learn. It carefully preserves free will and is completely consistent with an all-good, all-powerful deity. Did you guys follow that? That's rescuing time. And the other point I want to talk about, and the entire class was to set this point up. I had this idea, and everything I've said up till now was so I could make the statement I'm about to make and like allow you guys to really feel the weight of it. I think there's something really beautiful about figuring out that I have a purpose in this world. I have a telos is the Greek word. Teleology is the study of purpose. Even that orthogenesis, orthogentics, I can't remember the name, is based on the idea that everything has a purpose. Things evolve towards perfection. They evolve to get better and better, not randomly. But things are designed to get better and better. This idea of, Mark Twain said, the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. That everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a dharma. And you find out what that dharma is. And you live in congruence with that. And you become an instrument in the hands of the divine. And you work in congruence with the divine current. I think that is a beautiful idea. And amazingly, within these difficult, thorny topics that Krishna is getting into, that idea speaks strongly to me. You were put on this earth to fight in this battle. You were put on this earth to protect the innocent. Get up. Carpe diem. Seize the day. He who hesitates is lost. That's from Cato. The play Cato by John Addison. He who hesitates is lost. Carpe diem is from Horace, the Stoic philosopher. The two most important days of your life, the day you're born, the day you find out why. That's Mark Twain. You look across the world of literature and ideas, you find this idea that I'm here for something. I got to find out why I'm here. I got to find out what my purpose is, and I got to live according to my purpose. That's in the verse. That in this crazy world where things are built and then are ground to dust, and where we live lives of quiet desperation, and where sometimes it seems like it's pointless, there's also some purpose, some method to the madness, some thread, some current that you can get in line with and in congruence with, and you can move mountains and work miracles and be a miracle and be a part of a miracle and be a part of something bigger than yourself and live a life of purpose and value and meaning. That's also in this verse. And that sometimes you gotta jump. That's not always slow, incremental, mini steps. Sometimes you got to jump, like Narayan and Ananda just got married. That's a jump. You can't know. One of you could get sick and die next year. You can't know. You take it, it's a calculated risk. What to speak of in the West, people actually get divorced. They make a lifelong vow and then give it up. They have no integrity. But even if you're dealing with people with some semblance of integrity, like for most people in the West don't realize this, but people from India, if you tell them that you are divorced, they think you're like some kind of criminal. It's so low class. Who will get married and have a divorce? It's like less than 1% of the Indian population gets divorced. You know the way we look at people who eat meat? We're like, ooh. We're like, that's how Indian people look at divorced people. Like, we don't want our children hanging out with you. Like, it's okay. You are Western. It's okay for you, Bideshis. But we don't want our children to play at your home. Right? Yeah. But even if you have integrity and you get married in earnest, the person could die, get in an accident, anything can happen. There's inherent risk involved in life. And so what I found in the verse that inspired me was that you do the math, you figure out what your dharma is, and then you take some risks for Krishna. You do something wonderful. Prabhupada, when he talked about coming to the West and setting up temples, we now have 700 temples around the world, in all the major countries of the world. Our books are published in over 100 languages. We are a bona fide religion. We have over 1 million members, and we're going to be around for a long time. Because if you last 100 years and have 100,000 members, then you don't die out. And we're 60 years. We already got 1 million members, so we're not going anywhere. And plus, we got land. That's it. Now you're here to stay. That's a good thing about buying churches, is now you got to maintain them. It just gives you something to do. And someone says a building, it's like, oh, well, we might as well maintain it. If you're just meeting in a tent or under a tree, you can just stop doing it. It's no big deal. Once you have a building, I guess we got to fix it. I guess we got to repair the roof. I guess we got to paint the place. I guess we got to improve it. I guess we got to lay a new tile floor and refinish the wood and fix the bathrooms, and you just start maintaining it. And all of a sudden, you got a whole bunch of people maintaining a place. And well, as long as we maintain it, we might as well do something with it. We better have some programs and invite people and start teaching them stuff. It really forces you to be active and not get lazy. Otherwise, you end up looking at your phone all day. Playing some endless running game on your phone. So, oh wow, I'm down to 3%. Thank you. So, Prabhupada, when he was describing his coming to the West and doing outreach and setting up this tradition in the West, where it had been locked up in India for millennia, with Sanskrit texts and deities, like the real deal, not like Neo-Hinduism. Neo-Hinduism is whatever, but an authentic Vaishnava tradition that follows the rules and regulations, that makes pundits out of Westerners. It was such a wild idea that was hatched. While England was ruling India, it was so subversive and anti-colonialist. And Prabhupada was describing his idea to one of his students in the 70s. And he said, we're chasing rhinos. If you're going to hunt, we don't hunt. We don't eat meat, fish, or eggs. We're vegan. But Prabhupada said, if you're going to hunt, don't just hunt like a dog or a rabbit. Go hunt a rhino. That way you're at risk. And if you fail, they'll say anyway, he was hunting rhinos. How's he going to kill a rhino? So Prabhupada used to talk about his outreach in the West as chasing rhinos. You find some big, beautiful, challenging ideal, something that's going to take everything you got and more. You do your math on that stuff. But then once you've done that math and figured out what your dharma is and figure out how you can contribute to the world and do something amazing, whether it's through your work and you monetize it, or if it's through what you do in your spare time as a really rich hobby, then you seize the day. You get up. You jump, leap into the fray. Leap into the breach. While keeping your head above the fray is actually the poetry. You leap into the breach. That's from King Henry, from Shakespeare. And you keep your head above the fray while others are losing theirs and blaming it on you. That's Rudyard Kipling. But this idea is there that you do something amazing with your life and you take a chance. And so I see here with Arjuna and Krishna a number of things. Number one is free will is preserved. The problem of evil is tackled. What a true universal vision consists of is put forward. A challenge is made that we have to start to see the value in karma and disintegration and entropy. That we have to own that those things also come from an all-good and all-powerful God. That we have to see that many things may already be destined to be, and we can be a part of something bigger than ourselves, but that we always have free will to choose whether to do that or not. And so we are actually part of this. Our free will is part of the script. And then we also have to be ready to leap and go for it and take a chance. And it's not always 100%. It's not always just set in stone. And we do this in life. We start businesses. We pick a school. We pick a field we're going to go into. We guess what we're going to study and what we're going to do when we grow up and guess we're going to be happy doing it. Choose a life with somebody and assume they're going to be able to bear children. It's not like when you get married, you make your woman do a fertility test. She makes her man do a virility test. You start. You do some math. You figure it out. I always thought prenups were like the shadiest thing on the planet. You're going to make a lifelong vow, but then you're planning for the lifelong vow not working out while you're making a lifelong vow. It doesn't make any sense. Just don't get married. How about that? Yeah, in the West it's 50-50. In India it's 99-1. And when I first went to India in the early 90s, it was 99.95. No one got divorced. Like 20 times worse now. Now it's 1%. I'm not faulting anybody. I mean, I've been married 23, 24 years. Actually, this year will be 25. No. This year will be 23. I'm not getting divorced. It's not 50-50. Let me be more specific. Become a good human. Become a human being capable of making lifelong commitments. Deal with your vices and your passions. Tidy up your own act. Have some integrity. Grow a spine. And then learn to recognize other spined individuals who also have integrity. And then, after you've done that math, then you make a calculated guess. And it won't be 50-50 anymore. Problem is people jump in because they're lusty for the other person. And they start thinking that's going to win the day. Lust doesn't long endure. You got to go a little deeper than that if you want the relationship to last. You form a tawdry relationship, it'll die a tawdry death. You become deep, you form deep relationships that last a lifetime and beyond. Don't beat me up over the fact that there might be certain circumstances where divorce is appropriate. I'm aware of that. I can talk against murder and also be aware that there's caveats and exemptions to that. I'm making a general point. Mind your own house. Tidy yourself up. Arjuna is called Savya Sach. It means ambidextrous. Arjuna was qualified. He was qualified to be Krishna's instrument. He took the trouble to become ambidextrous, so he could shoot arrows with both hands. It's a rare skill. He became qualified, and then he was able to be tasked with a big task. So what I like about the verses, to wrap things up, is Arjuna has an existential dilemma. He has one in the middle of the second chapter, but this one is bigger. The one at the beginning of the second chapter is about family and things aren't going to work out, but this one is about like everything is collapsing around me. It's even more intense than the first existential dilemma he had. And Krishna's answer is full-blown theology, unapologetically put forward, with karma and time and entropy and death and destruction, and it forces us to look for the good in those things and look for the beauty in those things. And free will is still there, but more than all that, there's this idea that you have something you can do in this world, that you're amazing at, some amazing way you can contribute to this world. And the goal of life is to find out what that is and then leap into the breach and do something amazing. And if you fail, you get credit anyway. There's no loss or diminution. Krishna says this. There's no loss or diminution. Your heart's in the right place. You get credit. Krishna's that good. He's Bhava Grahi Janardhan. He's the Lord who accepts your mood. And people say, oh, he's chasing rhinos anyway. But then if you succeed, you did something wonderful, and the humility is there as well. You didn't do it, you were an instrument. You were swimming with the current. You stopped fighting the riptide. You swam with it, and all of a sudden, you're able to travel much further than you ever could on your own. This idea, I want to find out why I'm here, and then leap in with both feet and give my life to that higher purpose. This idea excites me. This makes me want to get up in the morning. Makes me want to be a good boy. Makes me want to be good to people, have integrity, be dependable, make commitments. It brings out the best in me. Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to do a little kirtan now. Hare Krishna.